Welcome legends and heli heads to this video on Heli Shed, which is the build of the SAB Genesis Urukay. I'm so excited, I can't wait to get going. I'd love to say that I'm going to get it all done in one video. That's probably not going to happen. And it's just the start of the weekend now. It's a Friday, and short of a bit of flying, I intend to generate. That's what the. Apart from a bit of flying, I intend to dedicate the whole weekend to making sure that I can get this build done. By hook or by crook, I don't care what time of the night I finish, but I will finish it. The SAB Genesis Urukay is the flagship SAB helicopter. And you notice that I keep saying SAB. It's not SAB, it's SAB Helicopter Division. And anybody who owns an SAB knows that, and anyone who doesn't calls it a SAB. I'm an SAB heli owner now. I call it an SAB. Our family. Couple of final things. There's very little information out there on the old tube of you on how to build one of these things, and well, why would there be? You've got a fantastic manual there, so time to put your big boy pants on and read it from. That means I have to remember how to read. Shit. Building an SAB Genesis Urukay, which is not going to look like this. Or that. What is that? Is that some sort of orc dancing or something? Some sort of Urukay dancing? I don't know. But no, it's going to look like this. How am I going to do this? As I said, with a manual, a workspace, and ultimately a bit of patience and love. Yes, building an SAB Genesis Urukay is a bit like getting Linda Lusardi and lots of pieces and putting her back together again in your shed. And for those of you who are under 50 and don't know who Linda Lusardi is, go and ask someone who is over 50. Alrighty then, there's our workspace, there's our manual. Let's crack on. Okay, first section is done. That's the control rod. Very simple. You've got the rod, you put a couple of threads in either end, they just push all the way in. There's no thread that it grips onto, and then you CA glue it in the appropriate places as per the manual. Really, really simple. Here's the thing though, on this end, the hole at the end of the rod was not, I don't think you can see that, was not central into the rod, nor was it straight. So when you pushed in the thread at the end of the rod, it went in at an angle. Now that has manifested itself in a slight, as you can see, twist there, a slight bend there on the actual thread. That's not a good start from SAB, not too impressed there. So I've done the best I can to make sure that it isn't going to come out with CA glue, but you would expect that to go in straight. Holy moly, it's getting worse. Just moving on to the second section, which is about transmission, and taking all the parts out of the foam box, that first layer, and I'm looking at the parts and inspecting it, and I noticed that one of the screws, look, has gone rusty. So this is pre-assembled by SAB, but I'm going to have to take that out and replace that. That's not good enough. And then I looked on the side with the, infamous serial number plate, and the screw there has indeed gone rusty. In fact, it's rusted so much that I'm not even sure whether that's a hex or a Phillips or what. If I'll be honest with you, a little bit disappointing. That's not good. Clearly there's an issue there with moisture in the packing. So SAB, all you got to do is use some silica gel packs. But the bottom line is, that is rusty and that is rusty. Okay, legends, just finished the second section, which was the transmission and the servo mounting brackets. I've replaced the screw that was rusty, as we saw in the previous slot, and also cleaned up the screw on the side there that holds in the serial number plate. A lovely piece of machinery. Okay, I've just finished fitting the battery tray onto the side plates here of the frame. Couple of key things. First of all, there are some screws on the inside of the frame here, which go onto the plates on the outside, or these mounting points on the outside. and a few screws at the front here. Quite weird sort of setup here that you can use on a sort of cam bush that it's got here to adjust the battery tray. I'm sure SAB owners know exactly what that's about. I don't yet. Where metal on metal is true, use a Loctite blue. But we never use red, not at Heli Shed. So my advice to you is screw them all in first, make sure that you understand what goes where, get your basic frame set up and you're content with, double triple check it in the manual, and then take every screw out one by one and Loctite it. But don't Loctite it as you go along, particularly if you're not familiar with building SAB helis. Right, next step. Okay, starting to take shape now. I've just mounted the transmission onto the two side frame plates that we've done in the previous section. All screws have now been taken out and Loctited, and everything is nice and secure. A point of note is that as you're building this part of the helicopter, SAB advise that you leave this screw out, which is just as well because it wasn't in the bag. So I'm hoping that's going to crop up later on in the build for something. Finally, at this point in the manual, I should have mounted the servos, one at the back here and one either side in these areas here, these mounting areas here, and I haven't done that at this stage because I want to do the electronics in a one when I move to that later on, and I don't think not having them in there at the minute is going to impede the build. Just building the head at the minute, and obviously coming across the thrust bearings and so on. A couple of tips for you when it comes to the inner and outer diameter. The one with the biggest inner diameter always goes closest towards the rotor head. That's pretty much on every helicopter. And to identify that, sometimes it's labelled on the outside, in and out. Now, they're not on this one. And, you know, if you're over 50 and your eyes are crap like mine are, it's difficult to identify which one is which. So what you can do is you can just pick the washer up, put it on the feathering shaft. You can put them both on, actually. Put them on the feathering shaft, and whichever one moves the most side to side is the one with the biggest inner diameter. So this one here is the one that's going to go on first. Then when it comes to your bearing, your ball race, there's an open side and a closed side. The open side should go in. And that's because when we pack this out full of grease, Mother Nature will take its course with centrifugal force and ultimately keep the bearing grease in. If it was the other way around, all the bearing grease is going to go where? That way. And we don't want that. We want the bearing grease to stay in. So, inner diameter is the big one with the biggest inner diameter is the one that goes closest to the rotor head. Obviously not here. I mean, this is the feathering shaft, but you get my point. And then your thrust bearing should go open side in. Right, legends, the head's built. I'm slightly out of sync with the manual purely because there's a couple of things that I want to do at the end. The servos, for example, the servo horns, I want to use the right servo horns, so I've ordered them, so they won't be until next week. So I'm leaving the mounting of the servos, etc. The head's quite interesting. There's quite a bit of preload there, but you're not to be too concerned about that. It even says in the manual that these should be freely moving, but they shouldn't fall under their own weight. And after about 20 flights, you should check those, and if necessary, fit 0.2 mil shims. Quite interesting. But putting them together was normal process. Top tips, obviously the old spindle shaft or feathering shaft wrench, always handy for doing this, particularly when it comes to doing the bolts up either side. I've gone old school. In other words, one of them is Loctited, the other one isn't. I dare say my club members will clip me around the ears for that, but that's the way I'm going for now until someone tells me otherwise. That's how I've always done it, and it always makes maintenance a lot easier. And of course, this alcohol gives meaning, and it's good for cleaning. Isopro alcohol, when you're doing a head, you're going to have grease everywhere. You're going to have bearing grease on your fingers. It's going to get on the head. And it's going to get on your blade grips. It's going to go everywhere. So do yourself a favour. Don't worry about it. Don't try and clean it up as you go along. You can't have too much of it. And ultimately, if there's any excess, it's going to get chucked out anyway when you're first testing this. in test flights. So be greasy, let it go all over your brand new matte rotor head, because afterwards, a bit of alcohol, a microfiber cloth, wipe it over, and it will be back to beautiful matte black. Okay, I've now put on the main blade grips drop links. These are 76mm from top to bottom, SAB facing outwards, obviously 180 degrees, this side and that side facing out, so that when it goes onto the swash it's facing the right direction. And the long part of the drop link should face down. I haven't fitted the servo links to the swash purely and simply because we haven't fitted the servos yet. We're waiting for those horns, if you remember. The motor is now fitted onto the mounting tray, and I have fitted this onto the frame and applied the correct tension so that the belt was tight, and then made the adjustments so that the belt fitting on the main drive here had about 1mm, about 0.5mm actually, at the bottom and the top, and it ran true onto the motor pinion. Now, for those of you who want to use an Align 850MX 540 kV motor, a point of note is that this is designed for the TB70, so the flat spot on the main shaft is not big enough, not long enough towards the top part of the motor, not long enough really for the main gear pinion, so that you've got that adjustment up and down to make sure that the belt runs true. So you're going to have to elongate that flat spot with some micro precision files, but not a drama really. Just take your time over it and make sure it's flat and not burred or convexed, so that when you do tighten that grub screw up, it's going to hit the actual flat spot properly and not make any adjustments that you don't want it to do. One other thing to mention about the motor is that the motor pinion bearing block has not been fitted, and that is because this will be fitted once the motor mount is in, it's true, the belt is on and so on, and then the motor bearing will get fitted on and screwed into the bottom of the frame. The belt will go in between this motor pulley and the bearing block, so that's not fitted yet. I've also completed the tail assembly. Really nice piece of machinery this. It's super smooth. It went together really well. Follow the manual, you can't go wrong. Couple of top tips not in the manual, and that is that the ball joint, the universal ball joint that goes at the bottom of the pitch slider, a lot of helicopters have this sort of mechanism of moving the pitch slider up and down the shaft. There's a ball joint in a receptacle there. Chuck a load of grease in there. It's metal, and where they come together they will cause friction, so put some grease in there. The other top tip I can give you is with regards to the grub screw on the main shaft there, which holds the drive pulley here. In the manual it tells you to Loctite it, don't, just tighten it up. And the reason for that is that when you mount this onto the boom and you're doing minor adjustments with the tail belt, just undoing that, you'll get a little bit of movement left and right, and then you can fine tune that belt alignment onto the rear drive pulley. So that's not Loctited in yet, but other than that, that's all ready to go. So I've now made a start on the boom and fitted the mounting bracket on the underside of the front of the boom, which is held in position with 3 nylon bolts secured there by 3 nylon nuts that you can see there. You do them up hand tight and then a couple of quarter turns, and they give you a special little spanner to do that. And then it's then held in position by this system here, which simply slides over and then CA glues into place at the front there in the 2 holes that's provided, and that just keeps them all as one unit basically. The tail fin is now on, secured in with silicone glue. Shout out to a club member who paid me a visit yesterday actually and done this for me, which I'm grateful for. Silicone glue, never come across that before, but yeah, you can get that from Amazon, it's fairly cheap. I've now fitted the tail assembly onto the boom. Went on very easily, just a couple of screws there through the boom into a captive plate which has got a couple of nylock nuts in. Very simple to put on, and you put that captive plate on beforehand, held in place with double-sided sticky tape, and obviously you use the screws to align those holes so that you can then do the screws up before putting the tail assembly on, so that it then captures and pushes the plate with the double-sided sticky tape into the right place and centralizes it properly. You can then undo the screws, take them out, and your plates are in position. Quite simple, straightforward. So tail assembly in situ, very happy with that, no dramas whatsoever. Good news, legends. The servo horns have turned up, so let's fit them servos. Okay, so mounting the servos. Now the servo mounting plate for two of the cyclic servos are at the back here, and we can see that there is a little cutout at the top and at the bottom on both sides there, which is there to accommodate any form of centralisation plastic or tab or anything else on the servos. Now every servo is different. These are Savox servos, the details of which are up there. But on the servos I'm fitting, you can see that the plastic tab there, or Delrin, whatever it is, goes all the way to the very edge of the servo mounting holes, that little block there, tab that sticks out there. So this means that even though we've got holes cut out on the servo mounting plate, as you can see there, those little indents, when we mount the servo on, we will find that the servo will rock left and right. Now this is no good. Even if we put plates on this and tighten this up now, we will either be biased to the left or to the right, and we're going to throw the geometry out all the way right at the very beginning of the journey. So this is no good for us whatsoever. Even with these cutouts, it's not accommodating enough for these particular servos. So what we've got to do is use micro precision files, and we've got to file that burr down so that the mounting tab is completely flat. And this way, when we mount the servo, we can see there that the servo is completely flat. Now when we tighten it up with the tab on this side, the servo will mount to the servo bracket true, and the geometry will be correct from the word go. Okay, legends, servos are in, no dramas with that whatsoever. Interestingly enough, there's no use of rubbers. The servo is mounted to the servo frame direct, and then via the carbon plate is screwed direct in. So this is all Loctited in now. By the use of a servo tester, we set center point position, and then via the use of this servo alignment tool, we're able to make sure that the arm, the servo horn, is actually at the geometric center position. So for example, center position would be about there, but geometrically for this setup, the center position via this tool, you can see there, is slightly lower. So all we do is we just take this horn off and adjust it as close as we can to that center position, and then via the use of sub trims or set up the fly barless unit, make that fine tuning. Very happy with that. Right, let's move on. Okay, so the motor is now mounted onto the frame via its mounting plates here and the front nose that goes with it. 4 main mounting locations. First of all here, and second of all here and the other side. These two here are 8mm nuts on 2 studs, and they basically slide into grooves in the main frame, which you would have seen earlier. Tighten it up with an 8mm spanner first before tightening up the front two. And the way in which you get your spacing, quite simply, is by putting a screw, which is provided in one of these 2 holes. I went for this hole, and then using an appropriate lever, moving the mounting tray and the motor forward, therefore applying the correct tension on the belt. I used a 5.25 carbon rod, placed that side of the frame, used the screw as a lever, and that enabled me to pull the motor forward given the right tension, and that ensures that the belt runs true. Right, back to the boom. The tail pitch slider rod, rudder rod, whatever you want to call it, is now in, and that's onto the tail, onto the pitch slider here at the back. Come along, it's held in position with a little clip here, a little bit of preload on there, which SAB say is perfectly fine. Coming back to the servo, we've got our gyro servo mounted, same principle as the other servos. Find your center point position and mount your servo horn. In this case, it's at true center at 90 degrees, as close as you can to the servo. The servo horn should be 18mm from the center to where the ball joint is, and that should be green Loctited in there, so it's nice and tight. Looking at the front of the boom, you can see to the front left-hand side, as we look there, there's an area there where we can capture the excess servo cable here with a couple of zip ties, and we'll do that for the next phase. Just showing you where I've secured the servo cable there in the place that's provided. Difficult to work out this one, how much to put in there. I'd rather have more this end than not enough. So I've only wrapped it over a couple of times there. Okay, the boom is now onto the frame, secured in place by a couple of button head screws here and one other at the bottom there. That's repeated the other side. The belt on the inside gets twisted 90 degrees and mounts onto the auxiliary pulley at the bottom of the main pulley, just the other side of this tensioner. The way in which you make sure you've got that orientation correctly, you turn the head clockwise, which is the normal rotation, and looking at the helicopter with it facing this direction, then the tail blade grip should also be going clockwise. Finally, with regards to tension of the tail belt, right now I've just undone these screws at the back to this side, to the other side, and done it manually. But when the helicopter is built completely and mounting batteries inside, as good old Supermoon said to me once, I'll just undo those bolts at the back, turn it upside down, hold the tail assembly, and then tighten it up, and that will give the right sort of tension that you need with regards to the tail belt. Don't forget it's got the tail belt tensioner there anyway to take up any slack, so to speak. Okay, legends, we really are now starting to get something that resembles a Genesis Urukay. We have now fitted the side plates, or bottom plates as they're known, both sides, and the landing gear, and at the back we've got a carbon plate there, a carbon plate which mounts onto the bottom part of the frame. The bottom plates here and the landing gear are separate to the main mechanics, and that's what separates this helicopter, and maybe other SABs, I don't know, this is the only one I've got, but that's what separates it from, say, an Align or a Tron, where the whole frame is connected to the landing gear. It is one piece of strength, if you like. Where this differs is that part of its strength and part of its overall sort of composition is to use these bottom plates here, these side plates, as part of the frame onto the landing gear. Okay, I've now mounted the fly barless mounting plate, which has an optional plate underneath to extend that out to give you room to mount other electronics. This fly barless plate is mounted onto some framework which is wedged in between the sides of the frame and then secured in place, doubled up by our canopy mounting points. I've also mounted on the side here the cover where wiring goes in this channel here. So the last thing we're going to do then is we are going to fit the canopy. Right, well, let's do that. And there we go in all of her beauty, although clearly she's not got blades fitted yet, but that is the canopy mounted and that is the helicopter built. We've got the electronics to do, and of course we've got to set up our fly barless unit and so on and fit the blades, etc. But as far as a build is concerned, that's it. All right, let's do some final thoughts. There we go, legends. That was the build of the SAB Genesis Urukay in a video montage. Fromage, massage, sausage, dressage, fuselage, all these arge words, very clearly French, because no word in the English dictionary can be that beautiful. We all know that, don't we? I'm sure you'll agree, in the flesh, so to speak, the SAB Genesis Urukay is a sight to behold. It is just wonderful when you consider that we've done that from 26 bags of screws and a couple of foam packaging of transmission and so on, and there she is now, a fully grown-up helicopter. Yes, we've got to do the electronics and the fly barless tuning and so on, but that is the joy of building a helicopter. The main journey is over and complete, and Eve, although is still asleep, when she wakes, she will be super excited to get out there and show us what she's made of, and I can't wait to let her do that. Till the next time, take care, fly safe.